Hello there, and welcome to Sleepy Galaxy Channel. Tonight we ask a question that sounds simple enough for a child to ask, and vast enough that it took our species thousands of years to answer without flinching. What actually sits at the center of everything we call home? Not home in the small sense, the walls around your bed, but the wider home. The one with 8 planets for rooms, gathered around a single fire that has been burning since long before any of them existed. And here is the small paradox we get to rest inside tonight. The answer is both obvious and strange at once. Obvious, because you already know its name. Strange, because the thing at the center of our solar system is not fixed in place the way a hearthstone is fixed to a floor. It sways, faintly, tugged this way, and that by every planet circling it, the way a house might lean, almost imperceptibly, toward whichever room its people happen to be gathered in. We have 4 unhurried regions to drift through tonight, and you do not need to hold on to any of them. First, we simply arrive. We walk up to the hearth itself, the fire the whole house was built around, and we let its light fall over us the way firelight falls over a room at the end of a long day. Then we step in closer, past the flames, into the fire's own furnace, tracing the long, patient path a single particle of light takes on its way from the core out to your window, a journey older than any story you have ever been told. After that, we wander out into the rooms around the hearth, the orbits, the family of worlds, and the surprising truth that even the center of a solar system is something that moves, something that breathes, rather than a point nailed forever in place. And last, we sit with the long story of the fire itself, how it began, how long it has kept burning, and how, over centuries, we came to know all of this without ever leaving home to learn it. 4 regions, and you can let all 4 go now, because I will carry them for you. If a story like this one is useful to you, if it has ever helped you drift off on a night when your mind would not stop turning, a like or a subscribe helps this small channel find its way to other people who are also lying awake somewhere, waiting for something soft to listen to. There is nothing here tonight that you need to hold on to, and nothing you need to remember. Let your shoulders ease down into whatever is beneath them. Let your jaw loosen. Let your breath find its own unhurried rhythm, in and out, without any help from you. Settle in. Let's begin. Let your breath settle now, all the way down, until there's nothing left to do but rise. Not rise the way you climb a stair, but rise the way warmth rises from a floor, without effort, without asking your legs for anything at all. Feel yourself lift free of the mattress, free of the room, free of the roof above you, up through the dark and the scattered lights of your own small street. Up past the last thin ribbon of cloud, until the whole turning earth is only one bright marble among many, and you are floating somewhere far above the flattened, spinning disk of the solar system, looking straight down on it, the way you might look down into a shallow bowl of light. From up here, you can see the shape of the thing, rings within rings, pale as the grooves of a fingerprint, each one a world, or a scattering of worlds tracing the same patient circle it has traced for billions of years. And at the very middle, in the exact place where every one of those rings begins, there sits a single point of light, warm and steady, holding the whole hushed arrangement together the way a held breath holds a held note. You already know its name. You have known its name since before you could read. So let the question arrive softly, almost playfully, the way a familiar riddle arrives when you already suspect the answer will slip through your fingers. What sits directly at the center of the solar system? You want to say the sun, and for tonight, floating here in this easy dark, that answer will do just fine to begin with. It is true enough to rest on. But hold it loosely, because before this night is over, the answer is going to turn softer than you expect, stranger than you expect, and far more forgiving than you expect. Not a single fixed throne at all, but something that moves, something that breathes, something closer to a shared arrangement than a monument. For now, let the obvious answer carry you, the way a familiar tune carries you into a room you've entered 1,000 times before, hummed under your breath before you even remember choosing to hum it. Notice, too, how little urgency there is in the asking. This isn't a puzzle meant to keep you awake, turning it over and over until it resolves. It is closer to a question a child might ask right before sleep, half-formed, more curiosity than concern, tossed out into the dark simply because the dark seems like the right place for it. You can let it sit there beside you, unanswered for now. The way you'd let a favorite blanket sit folded at the foot of the bed, not needed yet, but near, and known to be near. Because there is something almost domestic about the shape you're looking down on. A house is not simply four walls. A house is a house because of what it's built around. The one warm room every hallway eventually leads back to. The fire that was there first, before the rest of the rooms were ever added on. Think of the sun this way tonight, as the hearth at the very center of a great old house, and every planet, every moon, every drifting fragment of ice and stone as a room built at some particular distance from that fire, close enough to feel its warmth, far enough to keep its own particular temperature, its own particular dark. Mercury is the room nearest the fireplace, almost too warm to sit in for long. Venus and Earth and Mars are the rooms just down the hallway, each one furnished differently by how close it happens to sit. Jupiter and Saturn are the wide rooms further along, cool and vast, lit more by reflection than by direct heat. And far out past Neptune, past the edge of what most people think of as the house at all, there are rooms so distant that the fire is only a bright point glimpsed through a frosted window, more memory of warmth than warmth itself. And yet every single room, however far-flung, still belongs to the house, still keeps its shape because of the hearth burning quietly at the center, still owes the very fact of its own orbit to that one small point of light. Here is the first small fact worth letting settle into you, worth letting sink the way a stone sinks slowly through still water. The sun holds something like 99.86% of all the mass in the entire solar system. Nearly everything that is anything out here, every planet, every moon, every comet trailing its faint dust, every asteroid tumbling through the dark between Mars and Jupiter, all of it together barely amounts to a rounding error beside the fire at the middle. If you gathered the whole house, every room, every wall, every roof beam, onto one side of an old iron scale and set the hearth alone on the other side, the hearth would barely tip. The house, in the most literal and physical sense that gravity understands, is arranged around its fire, because its fire is, for all practical purposes, almost the entire house. Everything else, the blue world you call home included, is a kind of grateful afterthought, gathered warmth, leftover ember, drifting close because the fire is simply too large, too commanding, not to be gathered around. There's a comfort in a fact like that, if you let it be comforting rather than dizzying. It means the arrangement you're floating above isn't precarious. It isn't a scattering of separate things that happen to share a neighborhood, held together by coincidence or by luck. It's a single structure, built the way a real house is built, around one central, undeniable, overwhelming presence. And that presence has been holding its shape, holding its position, holding the whole quiet household together for longer than almost anything else you could name. You don't have to worry about the walls of this house. You don't have to worry about the floor. You don't have to check, the way you sometimes do at night, that the door is really locked, that the stove is really off. This room was built to last, and then the rest of the house was built around it, wing after wing, hallway after hallway, for 4.5 billion years and counting, and none of it has ever once needed you to hold it up. Let that thought stay with you for a moment before you move any further inward. Whatever else this night teaches you about fire and distance and the slow turning of worlds, let this first fact be the one that settles into your shoulders and lets them drop. The house you live in was built around something that isn't going anywhere. The fire at the center has outlasted every worry you have ever carried, every year you have ever lived through, every single night you have ever lain awake, wondering whether things would hold. They held. They are holding now. 99.86% of everything in this entire, sprawling, many-roomed house is the fire itself. And the fire is not tired. So let yourself stop worrying about the answer to the riddle for now, and just enjoy the shape of the question, the way you'd enjoy the shape of a familiar hallway in the dark. One, you don't need your eyes to walk. You are still floating high above the plane of the whole arrangement. High enough that Earth and Mars and Jupiter are only pale beads strung along their separate silent orbits. High enough that the fire at the center still looks small from here, contained, almost gentle seeming at this distance. The way any fire looks small and safe when you're viewing it from clear across a wide, dark room. But that is about to change. Because you are curious in the unhurried way you're allowed to be curious tonight, no urgency to it, no need to hurry toward any answer, you find yourself beginning to drift. Not falling. Nothing about this movement resembles falling. It is closer to the way you might drift toward a fireplace on a long winter evening, drawn without deciding to be drawn, carried by nothing more demanding than the pull of warmth itself. The rings of light below you begin, very unhurriedly, to widen. The bright point at the center begins, very unhurriedly, to grow, not sharpening into anything harsh, just filling more and more of the dark in front of you, the way a fire seems to grow larger and larger the nearer you let yourself come to it, until its glow is the only thing left at the edges of your vision. You are heading inward now, room by room, past the outer edges of the house and toward the hearth itself, curious, in this same unhurried way, about what kind of fire this actually is. Because it occurs to you, drifting closer, that you have never really asked. You have called it a fire your whole life, without wondering what burns there, what keeps it lit, what makes it different from every other fire you have ever warmed your hands beside. And so you let the distance close, gently, steadily, the great disk of the solar system falling away behind you like a house dimming into its own hallways, until there is only the one bright room ahead, waiting, and the fire inside it waiting with it, ready to be seen for what it truly is. And as you drift nearer to that lit point at the middle of the house, close enough now that it stops being a pinprick and starts being a presence, it helps to ask, in this unhurried way you're allowed to ask things tonight, what kind of fire you're actually approaching. Because a hearth, even the hearth at the center of everything, is still just one fire among countless others, and this one happens to belong to a very ordinary family of flames. Astronomers have a name for it. Tidy and almost affectionate, a G-type main sequence star, which most people simply call a yellow dwarf. though there is nothing small about it from where you're floating, and nothing modest about the warmth pouring off it. It is, in the long reckoning of things, middle-aged, about 4.5 billion years old, give or take 100 million, which means it has already been burning steadily for longer than there has been life crawling, swimming, or dreaming on the small blue world tucked into one of its outer rooms. It is not young. It is not old. It is simply, comfortably, in the settled middle of its life, the way a hearth that has been kept burning in the same house for generations settles into a kind of unbothered permanence, no longer needing to prove anything to the room around it. From where you drifted down from, high above the plane of the whole system, the distance might have felt abstract, a number without weight. But let it land softly now. This fire sits about 150 million kilometers from the small room where you usually sleep. And its light, traveling as fast as anything is permitted to travel, still takes a full 8 minutes to cross that distance and reach you. Every time you have ever felt sunlight touch your skin, you were feeling something that left its source 8 minutes earlier, a small envelope of warmth already in transit before it ever found you, arriving right on time every single day, without fail, for your entire life. There is something almost tender in that, a fire so faithful in its reach that you never had to wonder whether its light would arrive. And the fire itself is large in a way that resists easy holding. If you could somehow empty it out and begin filling its volume with earths, tucking them in one after another like stones into a jar, you would need more than 1 million of them before the space was full. 1 million earths, and then some, all fitting inside the one hearth that everything else in the house orbits. It is worth letting that number simply sit with you for a moment, not to overwhelm, but to widen the room you're picturing, because the astonishing part is not that something this large exists. The astonishing part is how unremarkable it is once you step back far enough to see the whole neighborhood. Because here is the truest comfort of this movement, the one worth resting your attention on longest. This hearth, despite everything it means to you, despite being the one fire your entire house was built around, is an entirely ordinary star. Not rare, not exceptional, not some singular, one-of-a-kind blaze that the universe went out of its way to craft. Out among the hundreds of billions of stars turning slowly through our galaxy alone, this particular kind of fire, a G-type yellow dwarf, middle-aged, steady, unremarkable in every technical sense, is one of the most common types there is. Somewhere out past the edges of what you can see tonight, countless other houses are arranged, right now around fires very much like this one. Countless other floors are being warmed the same patient way. And rather than making your own hearth feel smaller for being so common, let it do the opposite. Let it feel more dependable. A rare fire would be a worrying fire, untested, unpredictable. Its behavior unknown because so few others like it exist to compare it against. But an ordinary fire, one type among hundreds of billions, is a fire whose habits are deeply, thoroughly understood. A fire that behaves the way its whole enormous family of siblings behaves, patiently, predictably, for billions of years at a stretch. Your hearth is the reliable kind. The kind that does not flare unexpectedly, does not gutter, does not surprise the house it's built around. It has been burning in this same steady way since long before there was anyone to notice, and by every measure astronomers can gather, it has years upon years of that same steadiness still ahead of it, enough that nothing tonight, or tomorrow, or across the whole span of a human life, will find that fire changed. So let that be the shape of the comfort you carry through this part of the drift, The fire at the center of your house is not a strange or fragile or singular thing balanced on some improbable edge. It is a common, well-understood, dependable kind of flame. One that countless other houses across the galaxy share, each one arranged the same unhurried way around its own version of this same warmth. You are not orbiting an anomaly. You are orbiting something utterly typical, and typical, out here, means safe, means tested by time, means already proven, over and over, across an ordinary, sturdy family of stars, stretching further than counting can really reach. Think of it this way, if it helps the picture settle. Among the great range of stars scattered through the sky, some burn far hotter and bluer, racing through their fuel in a handful of hurried millions of years before they're gone, brilliant and brief. The kind of fire that scorches fast and doesn't last long enough to warm any house that might have gathered around it. Others burn low and red and impossibly patient, dim little embers that will still be glowing long after brighter stars have gone dark. Sipping at their fuel across trillions of years, your hearth sits in the wide, comfortable middle between those extremes. Not the fastest, not the faintest, not the most dramatic performer in the sky, but the reliable, well-worn kind of fire that a house can actually be built to last around. It is neither rushing toward its own ending, nor barely giving off enough warmth to notice. It is exactly, precisely enough. Enough light, enough heat, enough time. And that particular balance, common as it is out among the hundreds of billions of stars turning through this one galaxy, is precisely what allowed a house like yours to become a home at all. There is a quiet kind of humility in that too, if you let it settle rather than resist it. Your hearth is not the largest fire in the sky, not by any measure the universe keeps. Larger stars exist, burning far grander and far hungrier, consuming themselves in a fraction of the time. Your fire simply doesn't need to compete with them. It was never trying to be the brightest hearth in the largest house. It only ever had to be steady enough, for long enough, to let a small blue room warm slowly under its light for billions of years without interruption. And by every account gathered so far, that is exactly what it has done, without ever once needing to be relit. And now that you've drifted close enough to feel that steadiness, rather than simply hear about it, close enough that the light isn't just illuminating you, but seems to lean against you a little, a new question settles in, quiet and curious rather than urgent. Because if you actually let yourself look at this fire, really look, the way you might lean toward a hearth on a cold night and watch the flames instead of just feeling their heat, you start to notice that it doesn't behave the way fire is supposed to behave. There's no crackle, no log slowly collapsing into ash and smoke, no fuel being consumed and turned to nothing, the way wood in a fireplace slowly gives itself over to flame and leaves only embers behind by morning. Whatever is happening inside this hearth, it isn't burning in any sense your body already knows from cold nights and small fires in small rooms. So let the drift continue, a little further in now, past the outer warmth, and toward whatever is actually happening at the very heart of the house. Because something in there is producing all of this light, all of this heat, all of this million Earth largeness, hour after hour, year after year, for 4.5 billion years running. And it is not doing it the way any fire you have ever warmed your hands over has ever done it. There is no wood being fed into it from some unseen hand, no fuel stacked up and slowly running low, no smoke curling away to signal that something is being spent. And yet it never dims, never wavers, never asks to be tended. What burns in a hearth like this, when nothing is truly burning at all in the old familiar sense, that's the question worth carrying with you, unhurried, as you sink lower, past the outer glow, down toward wherever the true heart of this fire is kept. And nothing there burns the way wood burns. There is no crackle, no catching, no fuel turning to ash and smoke the way it does in the small fires you have known. What you are leaning toward is a different kind of flame altogether, one that does not consume so much as transform, and to understand it you have to keep drifting inward, past the outer glow, down through layer after layer of the house's own fire, until you reach the room at the very center where the true burning happens. This is the core. It is small compared to the whole of the sun, barely a quarter of the way out from the middle, and yet almost all of the fire's heat is born right here, in this one close, dense, patient chamber. Picture it the way you might picture the deepest room of a house on the coldest night of the year, the room built around the original hearthstone, the one every other room was later added onto. Down here, hydrogen is not fuel in the ordinary sense. It is simply the material the fire is made of, atom pressed against atom under a weight you cannot really picture, though you can feel its cousin every night when your own body settles into the mattress and lets gravity hold it there. In the core of the sun, that same pull, gravity, patient and enormous, squeezes hydrogen nuclei together with such force, at such closeness, that they do something hydrogen almost never does anywhere else in the universe. They join. This joining has a name, and it unfolds the way a story unfolds, one small step leading gently to the next. It is called the proton-proton chain, and you can let the phrase settle rather than analyze it, because underneath the name is something almost tender, two protons, drawn together by pressure and heat, eventually becoming one nucleus of deuterium, releasing a faint particle of light and a whisper of a neutrino as they go. Then a third proton joins that new nucleus, and out comes a form of helium lighter than the kind you know, along with more of that soft outward light. And when two of those light helium nuclei meet, they finally settle into the ordinary helium that fills the room a little more each moment, releasing two protons back into the fire to begin the whole hushed sequence again. 4 hydrogen nuclei, in the end, become one nucleus of helium. And in that becoming, a small but real amount of mass simply is not there anymore, not destroyed, not lost, but poured outward as pure energy, exactly as if the fire were converting its own tinder directly into warmth, without any smoke at all. For this transformation to happen even once, the conditions have to be almost unimaginably intense, and they are. Down in that innermost room, temperatures reach about 15 million degrees, hot enough that atoms cannot hold their electrons close, hot enough that matter itself takes on a fluid, restless form called plasma, dense and pressing, and endlessly active. You do not need to hold that number in your mind with any strain. Let it simply mean hotter than any flame you have ever stood near, hotter than any hearth of wood and coal could ever burn. And still, from all that intensity, what eventually reaches you, hundreds of seconds and many minutes later, is nothing but a soft warmth on your skin, filtered down to something entirely gentle by the long distance and the long journey still ahead of the light. And this happens not once, but constantly, on a scale that resists ordinary counting. Every single second, deep in that core, something like 600 million tons of hydrogen are pressed into helium. 600 million tons, every second, night after night, for longer than there have been nights on Earth at all. You might expect a number like that to feel frightening, the way an avalanche or a flood might feel frightening, something too large and too fast to be safe. But let it settle differently. This is not a fire raging out of control. It is not accelerating, not consuming itself in a rush towards some crisis. It is a fire that has found long ago its own perfect pace, the same 600 million tons, more or less, every second, for billions of years, and it will keep that same unhurried pace for billions more. There is nothing urgent happening in that room tonight. There is only continuation. What keeps that pace so steady, what keeps the whole enormous fire from either guttering out or rushing away from itself, is a kind of balance so precise it deserves its own patient attention. Scientists call it hydrostatic equilibrium, and though the name sounds technical, the idea underneath it is almost like something you already understand in your own body. The way your breath finds its own level without you having to think about it. Inside the sun, two great forces are always pressing against each other. Gravity pulls inward, all that enormous mass wanting to collapse in on itself, wanting to draw every last particle down toward the center, and pressing back outward with exactly enough force to meet it is the light and heat rising up from all that fusion in the core, the outward push of the fire itself, streaming upward through the layers above. These two forces do not win against each other. They do not need to. Instead, they have settled, over unimaginable spans of time, into an exact and continuous agreement, inward pull-matched, moment by moment against outward push, so that the whole vast structure holds its shape without any collapse and without any explosion. If gravity outweighed the outward pressure even slightly, the whole fire would draw tighter and tighter upon itself. If the outward pressure ever won out, even briefly, the fire would swell and dissipate into the surrounding dark. Neither happens. Instead, there is this held stillness, this vast interior calm, a flame that quite literally holds itself up, tends itself, without anyone reaching in to add another log or bank the coals. Let that settle over you the way you might let a hand rest lightly on your shoulder. This is a fire that needs no tending tonight. No one has to check on it before sleep. No one has to stir it or feed it or worry that it will go out while the house lies dark and undisturbed. It has been finding this same balance for 4.5 billion years, and it will go on finding it for billions more, and every single one of those years it has simply continued. The pull and the push meeting each other in the same unbroken agreement, deep beneath the floor of the house you are resting in. You do not have to hold anything up tonight either. Somewhere far below the room where you are lying, something vastly larger than you has already worked out how to hold itself, unhurried, without strain, and it has been doing so since long before there were nights to sleep through at all. Think of every hearth you have ever known, the kind built from stone or brick, and think of how differently they behave from the fire at the center of this house. A hearth of wood needs its ash raked, its logs turned, a hand to add another piece before the flame gutters, another hand to close the damper before it grows too wild. This fire needed that kind of tending exactly once, at the very beginning, when the cloud that would become the sun first drew itself inward tightly enough to light. Since that first striking, so long ago that the number stops feeling like a number and starts feeling more like an idea, it has required nothing further from anyone. The balance renews itself every instant, gravity and pressure checking each other again and again faster than thought, faster than a held breath, so that what you are picturing is not a fire flickering and correcting itself moment to moment, but something closer to a single note held perfectly, without wavering, for longer than a note has ever needed to be held. A fire that banked itself before there was anyone to bank it, and that has simply continued being banked, low and lingering, ever since. There is a kind of rest available in that thought, if you let it in slowly. So much of what keeps you awake at night is the sense that something needs your attention, that some small fire somewhere will go out if you stop watching it. That stillness has to be earned through vigilance. But here, at the very center of the house you belong to, is a fire that proves otherwise. Proof, if you want it, sitting quietly beneath everything, that balance can hold itself, that some things really do take care of themselves while you sleep. You are allowed to stop watching your own fires tonight. You are allowed to let something else, larger and older and steadier than you, be the one that keeps its own perfect stillness while you rest in one of its outer, warmer rooms. But even a fire this patient cannot keep its light to itself forever. Somewhere in that dense, glowing core, in this very moment, a single photon has just been born out of one small joining of nuclei. One flicker among the uncountable flickers produced every second in that 600 million ton exchange. It carries almost nothing on its own. A small packet of light released the instant that new helium nucleus settled into being, and now it begins to move, the way a spark might lift for a moment above a hearth before the surrounding warmth folds back around it. It does not travel far. It cannot. The room it was born into is so dense, so tightly packed with other particles, that almost immediately it meets something in its path and is turned, absorbed, released again in some new direction, over and over, a single small piece of light, trying, patiently, to find its way up and out of the fire that made it, into the long climb still ahead through everything the house has built above the hearth. And that held stillness, that fire banked so perfectly against its own weight, is not the end of the story. It is only the beginning of one flicker's journey. Somewhere in that 15 million degree furnace, a single packet of light has just been born, the way sparks are born deep in a woodpile, and you can follow it now, the way you might watch one ember's glow travel hand to hand through a long house before it ever reaches a window. This is not a fast journey. Nothing about it hurries. The light does not simply leap outward and arrive. It is born into a crowd, into a place so dense with other particles, other flickers of the same fire, that it can travel only the smallest distance before it meets something and is turned, absorbed, remade, sent off again in some new direction entirely. Imagine embers passed hand to hand through the deep timbers of a house, each pair of hands holding the warmth only a heartbeat before passing it on, never quite in a straight line, drifting sideways as often as it drifts outward, sometimes seeming almost to wander back toward where it started. This is the radiative zone, the layer wrapped around the core, and it is here that our single flicker of light spends most of its long walk home. Scientists call this a random walk, and the phrase is almost tender in what it admits, that even light, the fastest thing there is, can be made patient by crowding. Out in open space, this same light would cross the width of a room before you finished a breath, would reach you from the surface of the star in a bare 8 minutes, the way you already know it does. But it has not reached the surface yet. It is still deep inside, in that packed, glowing wood, where the distance between one handoff and the next is smaller than almost anything, where the light might travel the width of a single grain before it meets another particle and is turned aside, absorbed for the briefest instant, and released again in some new direction that owes nothing to the direction it came from. Forward, sideways, backward, forward again, the path has no memory of itself. And so, even though the light is never anything but fast, its true progress outward, room by room through the hearth, is almost unbearably slow. Here, inside the body of the hearth, this takes an unthinkable while, tens of thousands of years by the most common reckoning, and by some estimates 100,000 years or more, drifting through that dense inner wood of the star, jostled from one bit of matter to the next, going a little way, turning, waiting, going again. There is no rushing a fire that has this much of itself to move through. The warmth simply passes on, unhurried, patient beyond anything a house usually asks of its rooms, because this room is wider and deeper than any house you have stood inside. You do not need to hold the exact number of years in your mind, only the shape of the idea, that between the spark and the window, there is an entire age of quiet, faithful handing on, warmth given from one small piece of the fire to the next, without complaint, without ever once losing its way entirely, until at last it has crossed the whole deep body of the hearth. Let that settle for a moment, because it changes something quietly astonishing about the light that touched your skin today. The particular flicker that warmed your face this afternoon, or glinted off water somewhere, or simply lit the sky pale before dusk, that light did not begin its outward walk this morning, or this year, or even in your lifetime. It began its slow drift through the body of the hearth long before you existed, long before your parents existed, long before the last ice sheets pulled back from the northern half of this world. It has been quietly, faithfully working its way outward for longer than human memory holds any record of, threading through the packed heart of the star while whole ages rose and receded on the world it was traveling toward, while forests grew where glaciers had been, while rivers found new courses across a changing land. And only now, only today, has it finally stepped free. You were warmed by a very old flame finishing a very old errand. There is something almost restful in that thought, if you let it be restful rather than dizzying. The light does not check the calendar. It does not know or care how long its walk has taken, any more than an ember tucked deep in banked coals worries about how many hours until morning. It simply keeps being passed along, keeps being carried, one small transfer of warmth at a time, moving through the dense wood of the hearth the only way it can, patiently, in no hurry at all. Because inside a fire this size, hurry has no meaning. Every night the same fire sends you a little more of that old, well-traveled warmth, and every night it has just as much left to give. Because the hearth has been doing this for longer than any house has stood to receive it, and it will keep doing this for longer than any house standing now will last. Eventually, though, that long, slow, crowded walk changes character. Somewhere around 7/10 of the way out from the center, the material of the star grows thin enough, cool enough, that the old method of passing light hand to hand from particle to particle stops being the easiest way to move heat outward. And here the hearth does something almost alive. It begins to churn. This is the convective zone, and instead of light quietly threading through still matter, whole rising columns of hot gas begin to lift, carrying warmth bodily upward the way heat lifts through a room. The way risen warmth curls up along a wall and pools near a ceiling. Great slow cells of this gas rise from the depths, cool as they near the top, sink again, and rise once more, turning over and over in patient, rolling loops, carrying the last stretch of that ancient light's warmth the rest of the way toward the surface. You can see the fingerprints of this churning if you were ever to look closely at the fire's own skin. The surface of the sun is not smooth. It is covered in a fine, shifting texture, something scientists call granulation, small bright cells only about the size of a country or a sea, each one the visible top of a single rising column of that convecting gas. each one glowing brighter at its center, where hot material is surfacing, and darker at its edges, where cooled material sinks back down. They appear, brighten, and fade within minutes, thousands of them at once, covering the whole visible face of the star like the surface of water gently disturbed, like the softly mottled glow you might see on the underside of embers breathing in a hearth. Warm patches rising and settling, never still, never violent, simply turning over in their own unhurried rhythm. It is, in its way, the fire's own breathing, the last motion the light feels before it is finally set free. Picture that texture the way you might picture a low fire settling for the night, its surface never quite the same shape twice, always faintly stirring, and yet the room stays exactly as warm as it was a moment before. That is the strange comfort of granulation, constant small motion, held inside a larger, steadier whole. Nothing about this rising and sinking threatens the fire's balance. It is simply how a very large hearth breathes while it stands still. The way your own chest rises and falls all through the night, without ever once waking you to ask permission. And this is where our single flicker's long walk ends. After its tens of thousands of years threading the dense, quiet radiative deep, after its final ride upward on one of those slow-turning convective columns, the light arrives at last at the visible skin of the star, the place where the fire stops being packed solid with itself and opens, finally, into space. Everything before this point has been passage through the body of the hearth, warmth moving hand to hand and column to column through timber so thick that even light must be patient inside it. But at this last threshold, there is nothing left to pass the warmth to. The crowd thins to nothing. And the light, after its whole slow ancient walk, simply steps outward, free, into the dark, ready at last to cross the empty room between the fire and everything it warms. Think of everything that had to happen quietly, patiently, in order. Before that single glow could ever reach you, a spark struck at the very center. An age spent wandering hand to hand through packed timber, a last unhurried ride up through breathing columns of gas, and only then, only after all of that waiting, a clean step into open dark. Nothing was rushed at any stage. Nothing had to be. The fire has always had time enough, more time than any house could ever need, and every bit of light that finally reaches the open air outside has already been carried, tenderly, the whole long way home. And here, at last, is where that old light steps free. After its unhurried climb through the churning body of the fire, after tens of thousands of years spent passing warmth from hand to hand inside the hearth, the light finally reaches a threshold and crosses it and is out. This is the photosphere, the visible skin of the sun. The surface you have always pictured when you thought of a star sitting at a temperature of about 5,500 degrees. Everything you have ever seen of the sun with your own eyes, every sunrise, every late gold afternoon through a window, has come from this one thin layer, no thicker in proportion to the whole star than the varnish on a table. Beneath it, the fire is unimaginable. Here, at the photosphere, it becomes merely brilliant, merely close enough to touch with your gaze, merely the face the hearth finally shows to the room. Rest here a moment and let the image settle, a fire this old, banking its full furnace heart for 100,000 years, just to offer you, at the end of it, a warm and steady glow across a doorway. Nothing about that journey was rushed, and nothing about its arrival is either. The photosphere does not flare or announce itself. It simply is the place where the hearth stops being unbearable and starts being habitable. The line at which the house begins. And the house does not end there. Above the photosphere sits a second, thinner layer, the chromosphere, a delicate reddish rim best seen at the fleeting edges of an eclipse, when the ordinary blaze of the disk is hidden and this quieter shell is allowed, briefly, to show itself. Think of it as the air just above a hearth's coals, not the flame itself, but the warmth you feel rising off it, visible for a moment as shimmer. It is a modest layer, only a few thousand kilometers deep, easy to miss, and yet it belongs to the story. Proof that the fire's influence doesn't stop cleanly at its own surface, that its glow keeps a soft halo around itself the way any hearth does, a little warmth still hanging in the air just past the coals. But it is what comes after the chromosphere that turns this movement of the night into something genuinely strange, something worth lingering on precisely because it refuses to make easy sense. Above that thin reddish rim lies the corona, the sun's outermost atmosphere, a pale crown of light stretching for millions of kilometers, visible from Earth only during a total eclipse, when the moon's shadow blots out the blinding disk and lets this faint halo bloom into view like a held breath finally released. And the corona is hot, not merely warm, searingly, almost unaccountably hot, reaching temperatures of 1,000,000 degrees or more, hundreds of times hotter than the 5,500 degrees of the surface sitting just beneath it. Let that sit with you the way it has sat with generations of careful observers. The fire's skin is far cooler than the air just above it. Walk away from any ordinary hearth, and the warmth fades with distance, the way you would expect, the way you have felt with your own hands on a cold night. But the sun's outer breath grows hotter the farther it rises from the surface. And even now, scientists are still tracing out exactly how threads of magnetic energy, unseen and tangled, releasing their tension high above the photosphere and pouring heat into that thin outer crown. It remains one of the true open mysteries of our nearest star, and there is something quietly comforting in that too, that even the most familiar fire in existence, the one that has warmed every version of you and everyone you have ever loved, still keeps a small secret at its very edge. Not every question needs an answer tonight. The corona simply is, glowing patiently, waiting for its explanation the way embers wait for morning. You might imagine, on some other night, standing in a kitchen long after the cooking fire has been banked low, and noticing that the air just above the coals still shimmers with a heat that seems, for a moment, out of proportion to the low red glow beneath it. That small, ordinary mystery, magnified into something 1,000,000 degrees hot and stretched across millions of kilometers, is the corona. It does not need explaining to be trusted. It has been burning there, faithfully, however strangely, for the entire span of the fire's long life, asking nothing of anyone watching from below. From this corona, something begins to stream outward. Not light this time, but substance. The actual breath of the hearth. Charged particles, mostly protons and electrons, boil off the sun's outer atmosphere and go rushing out into the dark in every direction at once, a continuous exhale that never pauses, never rests, has not stopped once since before there were eyes anywhere to notice it. This is the solar wind, and it does not simply drift away and vanish. It pushes, it inflates. It carves out a vast, invisible bubble around the entire sun and all of its planets, a bubble made of nothing but the fire's own breath, holding back the colder, thinner material that drifts between the stars. This bubble is the heliosphere, and it is, in the truest sense, the shape of the house itself. The full volume of rooms the hearth's warmth actually reaches, stretched far out past the orbit of the last planet, farther than any of the worlds circling within it. An enormous, soft-walled dwelling built from nothing but outgoing breath and light. You are inside that dwelling right now. Every planet is the whole quiet neighborhood of worlds you have been drifting past on this long descent toward the fire sits nested inside the heliosphere the way rooms sit nested inside a house, each one still touched, however faintly, by warmth that began at the hearth. And like any house, this one has an outer wall, a place where the breath of the fire finally runs out of strength, where its outward push meets the cold hush of the space between the stars and can push no further. That boundary is called the heliopause, and it lies extraordinarily far out, well beyond the last of the planets, a threshold so distant that reaching it would take almost the whole of a human lifetime traveling outward at extraordinary speed. One small traveler has actually crossed it. The spacecraft Voyager 1, launched decades ago and still calling faintly home from farther away than any human-made object has ever traveled, passed through the heliopause and out the other side, leaving the bubble of the sun's breath behind and entering the space between the stars for the first time. It took that small craft more than 3 decades of steady outward travel, past every planet, past every last outpost of the neighborhood, just to reach the front wall of this house. Picture it, a single small lantern, carried for decades on a slow outward errand, finally stepping through the front door of the house and out into the wide, dark yard beyond, still glowing, still sending its faint signal back over that unimaginable distance, but standing now in a different kind of night, one no longer touched by this particular fire at all. Its instruments felt the change directly, the way you might feel a draft the moment a door swings open, the dense, warm breath of the solar wind falling away behind it, and a colder, sparser hush of interstellar material taking its place. Everything up to that threshold belongs to the hearth. Everything past it belongs to something else entirely, some other quiet dark, some other distant fires whose warmth may never reach this far. And so the floor of the house completes itself, room by room, wall by wall, the blinding, brilliant photosphere as the fire's visible face, the soft chromosphere as the air just above the coals, the mysterious overheated corona as its outer crown, the solar wind as its unbroken exhale, and the heliosphere as the entire shape of the dwelling that exhale creates, bounded at last by the heliopause. The outer wall, where the hearth's glow finally fades into the night outside. You have followed the light from the very center of the fire, all the way out to the edge of its influence, farther than sight, farther almost than imagination comfortably goes. And still it was one continuous unfolding, one warmth, spreading outward the way it always has. There is no need to look at the fire any longer. You have seen what it is, seen how it burns, seen how far its breath is willing to travel just to keep a house warm. So let your gaze come away from the light now, and let the rest of the room come into view instead. All the wide, dim, quiet space between the hearth and its outer wall, filled with drifting shapes that have been circling this fire for longer than there have been eyes to watch them do it. You do not need to walk out into that space. Nothing here asks you to move under your own effort. Not one step. Not one small push. You are already being carried, the way everything in this house has always been carried, out past the last of the light, into the long, slow float among the rooms themselves. And so you leave the fire behind, not by walking, but by being carried, the way a sleeping child is lifted from one room and set down in another without ever waking to the transition. There is no threshold to cross here, no doorframe to duck beneath. One moment you are close enough to the hearth to feel its glow on your face, and the next you are drifting out among the furniture of the house itself. The wide, dark rooms where the planets keep their quiet places, each one held at its own particular distance, each one filled with its own particular hush. You do not fall into this room so much as arrive in it, weightless, unhurried, the way warmth arrives in a house built well around its fire, reaching every corner without needing to be carried there by hand. This is what it means to be a planet. This is what it means, tonight, to be you, drifting here beside them. Because an orbit, and you may let this thought settle over you slowly, the way a blanket settles over a shoulder, an orbit is not a wall holding something in place. It is not a leash, not a track, not a room with locked doors. An orbit is simply a long, unbroken act of falling. Earth is falling toward the sun at this very moment, and it has been falling toward the sun for 4.5 billion years, and it will go on falling for billions more, and it will never once arrive. It falls and never lands, because it is also moving sideways fast enough that the ground it is falling toward keeps curving away beneath it, the way a stone thrown hard enough from a great height would keep missing the earth as the earth kept curving out from under it. This is the whole secret of the household's arrangement. Nothing here is held up. Everything here is simply let go, over and over, forever, and caught by its own motion each time. You might expect, if you are falling this way, to feel it. Some lurch, some drop, some flutter low in the stomach, the way a fast elevator gives itself away. But you feel nothing at all, and this is not a flaw in the arrangement. This is the whole point of it. Earth carries you around the sun at some 30 kilometers in every single second, a speed that would flatten a city if it were the wind against your skin, and you have never once noticed. Not today. Not any day of your life. Because you are not moving through the fall, you are moving with it. Everything around you is falling exactly as fast and exactly the same way, so there is no friction between you and your motion, no seam where the falling meets the felt. It is like being asleep in the back seat of a car, on a long, smooth road at night, the miles pouring past outside the window while inside. Nothing shakes, nothing jostles, nothing asks you to hold on. You are being carried at a speed beyond imagining, and the carrying itself is what makes it silent. This is the very thing that puzzles people, at first, about the astronauts who float inside their spacecraft, tumbling weightless past a window with the whole blue house turning slowly beneath them. It looks as though gravity has simply switched off up there, as though they have crossed some line where the fire's pull no longer reaches. But the fire's pull reaches everywhere in this house. It reaches the astronaut just as surely as it reaches you, just as surely as it reaches the outermost, coldest room at the edge of everything. What has happened to the astronaut is not an escape from gravity. It is in total surrender to it. Their capsule is falling, exactly as Earth is falling, exactly as you are falling now, falling toward the sun, and sideways past it in the same unbroken curve. And because everything inside that capsule is falling together, at the same rate, in the same direction, nothing inside has anything left to push against. The floor cannot press up into their feet, because the floor is falling too, just as fast. Weightlessness is not the absence of being held. It is the feeling of being held so completely, so continuously, that the holding itself becomes invisible. Watch them for a while, if you like, tumbling in their small lit capsule against the dark, turning a slow cartwheel with no floor to interrupt it, letting a pen drift from an open hand and simply hang there, patient, beside them, going nowhere, because there is nowhere for it to go. It looks, from a distance, like a kind of play, and in a way it is. But underneath the play is the same law that carries you tonight and carries the whole household besides. Fall together, and the falling stops feeling like falling at all. It becomes something closer to floating on your back in warm, unmoving water, arms spread, ears just beneath the surface, the world gone soft and muffled and entirely unthreatening. The pull that would otherwise drag you downward has nowhere to take hold, because you and the water you rest in are answering to it together, in the same breath, at the same unhurried pace. Let that settle over you as your own particular kind of relief. Whatever it is that has kept you upright and effortful today, whatever muscles have spent themselves quietly holding your shoulders, your neck, your spine, against the pull of your own small world, none of that is needed here. You do not have to hold yourself up in this room. You do not have to hold yourself up in any room of this house tonight. The same arrangement that carries a planet 30 kilometers every second without a single tremor reaching its surface is the arrangement carrying you now, and it asks nothing of you in return. It does not need your effort. It does not need your attention. It only needs you to stop bracing, the way the astronaut stops bracing the instant the engines cut and the long fall begins, and finds, to their own quiet astonishment, that falling forever feels exactly like resting. Notice, too, how little effort any of this seems to take. There is no engine running anywhere in this house, no unseen hand pushing the rooms along their paths, no hinge creaking to keep the whole arrangement turning. A falling body needs nothing but its own momentum and something to fall toward. And once those two things are in place, the motion simply continues, on and on, largely uninterrupted, for as long as nothing comes along to disturb it. Earth has been given this single generous push once, long ago, in the churn of the cloud that built the house, and it has not needed a second push since. The effort was spent at the very beginning, and everything after has been coasting. A long, unbroken coast that has outlasted every ocean, every mountain range, every living thing that has ever opened its eyes on this drifting world. You are riding on the residue of that first motion tonight, carried by work that finished before there was anyone here to notice it happening. Drift a little further out, now, past the nearer rooms, and let your eyes adjust to the scale of the whole house at once. From here you can see it properly for the first time, not one planet at a time, the way you might notice one lit window from the street, but the entire arrangement together. All of it turning, all of it falling, all of it held in the same unhurried orbit around the same low fire. There is a rhythm to it that has nothing to do with rushing. The nearer rooms circle their fire quickly, the way someone might pace a small kitchen. The farther rooms take their time, decades even, to complete a single slow turn past the same worn path. And yet, none of them are late. None of them are hurrying to catch up. Each one moves exactly as fast as it has always moved, on exactly the path it has always followed, and the whole house holds together, not because anything is fastened down, but because everything is falling in agreement. It is a strange thing to notice, drifting here amid all that unhurried motion. The house itself is moving, not just the rooms within it, circling their fire. The whole structure, in some sense, is stirring, ever so slightly, as if the floorboards themselves were breathing. You begin to wonder, watching this, whether the fire you left behind is really as fixed and central as it seemed when you were standing close beside it. A hearth is supposed to be the one thing in a house that does not move. And yet from out here, in the drifting dark among the falling rooms, you find yourself asking, almost without meaning to, where, exactly, does the true middle of this house actually sit? Whether the fire itself might be swaying, however faintly, in time with everything it holds. And still you are being carried, still that household of worlds moves around you without asking anything of you at all. And from this drifting vantage, held rather than holding on, a small question rises the way a question rises right before sleep, unforced, almost playful. Where, exactly, does the middle of the house sit? You have been told, in a way, since the very first breath of this journey, the hearth, the sun, the fire, everything gathers around. And that is true, but now, carried this close, watching the whole arrangement turn together, you notice something the eye alone would never catch from a chair by the fire. The hearth itself is moving, only a little, only just enough to answer the question more honestly than the sun ever could. Here is the gentle truth of it, offered the way a host might finally explain why the room always seems to breathe. The true center of the solar system is not a place inside the sun at all, but something called the barycenter, the center of mass of the entire household taken together, fire and every room combined. If the sun were the only thing in this house, the 2 points would sit on top of each other, and there would be nothing more to say. But a house is never only its hearth. It is also every armful of wood stacked in every corner, every warm and heavy thing arranged around the flame, and each of those things pulls back, however faintly, on the fire that seems to hold them. Most of that pulling back belongs to one presence in particular. Jupiter, vast and unhurried in its far orbit, carries so much of the leftover mass of this house, more than all the other planets combined, that its quiet tug on the hearth is not nothing. It is the largest single hand resting on the fire's shoulder. And because that hand never lets go, never even loosens, the true middle of the house does not sit fixed at one address forever. It wanders, slowly, patiently, on a rhythm mostly set by Jupiter's own 12-year round of the sky. The balance point drifts, and the sun, in answer, sways. It is worth sitting with how small and how real that sway actually is. The barycenter is not always buried deep inside the sun's great body, though often it is. There are stretches of years when the combined pull of Jupiter and its slower, heavier siblings out beyond it draws the true center of mass out past the sun's own visible edge, so that for a time, the exact middle of everything is not fire at all. It is simply space. Quiet, ordinary, unlit space, with the enormous hearth of the sun swinging around that empty point the way a sleeper might shift, unconsciously, around the center of a wide, soft bed. Nothing dramatic happens in those years. No one standing on Earth would ever notice by eye. The sun does not lurch or stumble, it only leans, over months and years, the way a held thing leans when the hands holding it are many and each is slightly different in strength. Picture it, if it helps the eyes grow heavier, the fire at the center of a room, and around it, a ring of unseen hands, each resting lightly on its far side, each pulling back just enough to matter, and no more. The nearest, lightest hands barely register at all. But one hand out among the rooms, Jupiter's, vast and unhurried, taking the better part of 12 years to complete a single round of the house, presses with a weight none of the others can match. Under that one steady, patient pressure, the fire does not resist. It simply drifts, in its own small orbit around a point that is not quite itself, tracing a slow, wide loop no larger than its own girth, over and over, on a rhythm that outlasts every one of your own nights and days. It has been leaning like this, patiently, for longer than there have been eyes anywhere to watch it. This is, in its way, the softest correction the night has to offer. You arrived above the plane of this house, looking down at one bright, obvious point and assuming, reasonably, the way anyone would, that of course the fire sits at the center, of course the flame is the throne. And the flame very nearly is. 99.86% of everything the house is made of belongs to the sun. Nothing else comes close to rivaling it. And nothing in tonight's answer takes that fact back. But mass being nearly everything is not the same as mass being the whole story, and in that small remainder, Jupiter's ponderous circling, Saturn's slower one, the fainter, patient tugs of everything else in orbit, there is enough weight to move even a fire this large. The house, it turns out, is not built around a fixed throne after all. It is a shared arrangement. Every room, however modest, has some say, however small, in exactly where the middle sits, and the hearth, generous as it is, does not mind sharing that particular point with the space around it. There is something almost tender in imagining the sun this way, not a stern, unmoving anchor holding the household rigid by sheer will, but a heavy, warm presence gently rocked by the very things it warms. A parent swaying, almost without noticing, to the shifting weight of children gathered close. A hearthstone settling, over long years, into whatever balance the room around it asks for. Nothing about this sway threatens the house. It does not tip over, does not flicker, does not lose its footing. It simply answers, the way anything large and generous eventually learns to answer the smaller things it loves, by moving, just slightly, to meet them halfway. And here is the part of the answer that reaches quietly out past this one house into all the others scattered through the dark rooms of the galaxy. This same small, steady sway, the one your own hearth performs for Jupiter's sake, is exactly what patient watchers use to find fires they cannot even see. A star too far away and too faint against its own brilliance to let anyone glimpse the planets orbiting it will still, almost imperceptibly, wobble in place, tugged by the worlds circling it the same way your sun is tugged by its own household. Astronomers call the trace of that tiny motion radial velocity, a fire's own light, stretching and easing back as the star leans first one way and then the other, betrayed only by the faintest shift in its color, its motion, its unhurried breathing. Read closely enough, that wobble becomes a signature. It says, something is here that we cannot see directly, something heavy enough to move even a star. It is how so many distant worlds, circling so many distant hearths, have first been noticed at all, not by seeing them, but by watching the fire they belong to lean, ever so slightly, in their direction. There is a kind of comfort tucked inside that method, if you let yourself notice it. No one had to travel out to those far households and count the rooms one by one. They only had to watch a single point of light long enough, patiently enough, across enough unhurried nights, and let its own small lean tell the story of everything gathered around it. The wobble does the introducing. The fire vouches, without meaning to, for everyone it warms. And your own sun has been doing exactly this all along, for anyone far enough away and patient enough to watch it, leaning almost nothing and saying everything about the quiet household arranged around it. So the answer to tonight's opening question turns out gentler and stranger than it first appeared, exactly as promised. What sits directly at the center of the solar system is, most of the time, very nearly the sun, and in some years, quite literally, it is nothing. A patch of open space, unlit and unremarkable, holding the honor for a while before the balance shifts back. Either way, the truth underneath both answers is the same one this whole night has been circling toward without rushing to say it outright. The house does not stand still, and neither does its hearth, and there is nothing unsteady or worrying in that at all. It is simply how a shared home behaves. It leans toward the ones it holds, and if the very middle of the house can be found to sway this gently, this subtly, in answer to worlds you cannot even see moving beyond the ones already named, Jupiter, and behind Jupiter's pull, all the slower, farther weight still waiting out there in the dark, then a new kind of question settles in, unhurried, the way the best questions do, right before the eyes grow heavy. If the middle of the house is this soft, this quietly negotiable, how large is the house itself? How far do its rooms actually reach before the warmth of the hearth finally gives out and the last wall of this home meets the open night beyond it? If the hearth itself sways this faintly, if even the household's center is something so easy to miss, then maybe it is worth asking, from your drifting, weightless place among the planets, just how far the walls of this house actually reach. Because a house built around one fire, however small its wobble, has to have rooms and corridors and, somewhere far off, an outer wall where the warmth finally runs thin. So let the wondering carry you outward now, past the last bright room you can name, out toward the edges nobody has ever fully mapped. Start with light, since light is the fastest thing the house owns, and even light takes its time getting anywhere. From the hearth to the room where you and every fire-warmed thing you know goes about its life, light needs a little over 8 minutes. That is the room you already understand, the one whose walls you could sketch with your eyes closed. But push further, past the rust-red room and the banded golden one, out to the pale blue-green room where Neptune turns in its long, unhurried circuit, and that same light, moving as fast as anything in the house can move, needs about 4 hours to arrive. 4 hours for a single beam that left the hearth to finally touch that far wall. Sit with that distance for a moment, not as a number to memorize, but as a feeling. The house is so much larger than the room you have been resting in tonight, and yet every bit of it, all the way to that pale far wall, is held by the same fire. And even Neptune is not where the house ends. It is simply where the light begins to feel stretched thin, where warmth has traveled so far it can barely be called warmth anymore, more a memory of heat than heat itself. Beyond that pale room lies a wide, dim hallway, scattered with countless small shapes, icy fragments and dwarf worlds, drifting in a loose band called the Kuiper Belt, a hallway that stretches on for billions of kilometers, far enough that its numbering stops meaning very much to a body that measures distance in footsteps or in heartbeats. And somewhere out along that hallway and past it is where our own sense of scale gives up entirely and hands the job over to instruments instead. Consider Voyager 1. Launched not long after your parents or your grandparents might have been young, a small metal traveler carrying a golden record and a farewell note to whoever might one day find it drifting. It has been moving outward, steadily, for nearly 50 years now, never resting, never once turning back, and in all that patient travel, It has gone more than 160 times the distance between Earth and the hearth, 160 times the room you live in, and by the house's true measure, it has barely cleared the front hallway. It has not left. It remains, even now, inside the reach of the sun's gravity, a resident of this same address. One who has simply wandered very, very far from the fireplace to see what the outer rooms look like, and past even Voyager, past the last signal it will ever send home, the house keeps going. Out beyond the Kuiper Belt's scattered hallway lies something almost too vast to hold in the mind honestly: the Oort cloud. A hushed, spherical shell of icy wanderers, comets that have likely never once felt real warmth from the hearth. Drifting so far out that the distance is best measured not in the units used for planets, but in light years, a shell that may stretch outward a meaningful fraction of an entire light year, perhaps close to a full one at its farthest edge. If the Kuiper Belt is a long hallway, the Oort cloud is the outer wall of the house itself, so distant and so faint that no telescope has ever seen it directly. It is known mostly by inference, by the rare comet that falls inward from its depths and streaks past, like a single leaf blown in from a garden so far off nobody has ever walked its paths. Try, for a moment, to picture that outer wall honestly, without rushing past it the way a number on a page invites you to. A light year is the distance light itself covers in a full year of travel, moving at the one speed nothing in the house can outrun, and still, out at the Oort cloud's edge, that same tireless light would need most of a year just to cross the gap between you and its farthest wandering comets. And within that unimaginable shell, each frozen traveler moves so unhurriedly on an orbit so long that a single lap around the hearth might outlast every human lifetime laid end to end since the pyramids were young. They are not lost out there. They are simply the furthest rooms of a house whose floor plan happens to be almost incomprehensibly large. Now, ordinarily, a person hearing numbers like these might feel a small drop in the stomach, that particular dizziness that comes from being told how little space they occupy against how much space there is. Let this feeling arrive differently tonight. Let it land as relief instead of as vertigo. Because a house this large, built around a fire this old and this dependable, does not need you to hold any of it up. It was arranged long before you existed, and it will go on being arranged long after, unbothered, unhurried, asking nothing of you at all. Being small inside something this vast is not a diminishment. It is closer to being tucked into a bed that turns out to be larger and more solid than you had realized, the walls farther away than you thought. Yes. But that only means there is more house between you and the cold outside, more distance for anything unfriendly to cross before it could ever reach the room where you are resting. Think of it this way. You are not adrift in some endless, empty dark with no relation to anything around you. You are one warm room among many in a house whose fire has been kept lit for 4.5 billion years without a single night of neglect. Every room, however far it sits from the hearth, receives some trace of that fire's attention. Even the Oort cloud's farthest, faintest comets are technically bound to the sun, technically part of this same shared arrangement, circling once every few million years in orbits so long and lazy, they make Earth's yearly lap around the fire look almost frantic by comparison. Nothing out there has drifted free of the house. It holds its own, all the way to its furthest, dimmest corner, even the corners it takes light nearly a year to reach. And you, specifically, sit remarkably close to the fire, comparatively speaking. 4 hours of light to Neptune, the better part of a year of light to the inner edge of the Oort cloud, and you, just 8 minutes out. 8 minutes from a fire that has never once let its flame gutter in 4.5 billion years. That is not a small thing. That is, in fact, about as close to the hearth as a room in this house can be while remaining a room of its own, with weather and water, and a floor solid enough to lie down on. Being small does not mean being far from what keeps you warm. It means, if anything, that you fit easily into the warmest part of a very large, very patient home, tucked in close enough that the distance barely registers as distance at all. So let the size of the house settle over you, not as something to measure, but as something to lean back into, the walls pushed out farther than any walking creature could ever cross in one lifetime, and none of that distance asking a single thing of you tonight. You do not need to understand the whole floor plan to be safely inside it. You do not need to have walked the far hallway or touched the Oort cloud's waiting comets with your own hands to belong exactly where you already are. The house is large enough to hold every question you could ever think to ask of it, and it will hold them without hurry, the way it has held every question asked before yours. And yet, somehow, creatures no larger than you, standing on a floor no bigger than a single room in this enormous house, did come to learn its shape. Small ancestors of yours, tucked into the very same warm room you are tucked into now, without spacecraft, without instruments that could see even one hallway ahead, looked up at that same hearth night after night and began, patiently, unhurriedly, to wonder. They began to ask the very question this night began with, what truly sits at the center, and their answers, passed carefully from one pair of hands to the next across centuries, from teacher to student, from one lifetime into the next, became their own long story, a lineage of watchers who never once left their small room, and yet, together, mapped a house this vast. It is a story that starts a very long time ago, with someone standing at a window in the dark, watching the fire, and beginning, gently, to guess. That question can wait a little longer, because before anyone learned to measure a house, the house had to be built, and the story of how it was built is itself a kind of lullaby, if you let it be one. So rest here a moment, still drifting, still held, while the story unspools backward, past every year you have ever known, to the very beginning of the hearth and everything around it. Picture, before there was a sun or an earth or a you to imagine either, a single slow cloud, hydrogen and helium, and a fine dust of heavier elements, the leftover ash of stars that had burned and ended long before this one began. The cloud was enormous and thin and cold, drifting through the galaxy the way a held breath drifts before it is finally let go. Something nudged it, perhaps the shockwave of some distant, long-forgotten supernova. A push so faint it would barely have stirred a curtain, and the cloud began almost imperceptibly to fall in on itself. Gravity is patient that way. It does not hurry. It simply waits for enough particles to lean toward the same center, and then it keeps pulling, a little more every year, for longer than a mind can easily hold. As the cloud collapsed, it began, naturally, to turn, the way water turns as it slips toward a drain, the way a blanket gathers itself into folds as it is pulled from one corner. That turning flattened the cloud into a wide, spinning disk, with almost everything crowding toward the middle, and only a thin remainder left circling in the outer reaches. The middle grew denser and denser, hotter and hotter, across what would have looked, to any outside eye, like an unremarkable stretch of dark. No flash, no announcement. only pressure quietly building where the most material had gathered, until at its very center pressure and heat crossed a threshold that nothing else in the disk would ever cross, and hydrogen began, for the first time, to fuse into helium. A fire lit itself in the heart of that turning cloud. The hearth had been built. And here is the part worth resting on tonight. Everything else in this house, every planet, every moon, this very earth, the ground somewhere beneath you right now, condensed from that same cloud, at that same time, out of the very same material. The dust that did not fall into the fire instead gathered itself, slowly, into pebbles, and the pebbles into boulders, and the boulders, over many millions of patient years, into worlds. The hearth and the house were built from the same wood. There was never a fire first and a home added later. There was one cloud, one collapse, one turning, and it became, all at once and unhurriedly, both the flame and every room around it. The iron in the ground beneath your feet, and the iron once fused inside far older stars, and the hydrogen still burning in the sun tonight, are, in the truest sense, kin you are, in a very real and very calm way, made of the same stuff as your own hearth. That is not a small thing to fall asleep to. All of that happened about 4.5 billion years ago. Say the number slowly and let it lose its edges, because numbers this large were never meant to be gripped tightly. They were meant to be floated over, the way you are floating now. 4.5 billion years is long enough that the fire has already spent roughly half of its ordinary life simply being steady, simply being exactly what it is tonight, a middle-aged flame, settled into its rhythm, in no rush to become anything else. And that is the second gift this story carries, quietly alongside the first. The fire is not old, in the way a flame can be old. It is barely past its own midpoint. For every year that has passed since that cloud first began to turn, there are roughly that many years still ahead before anything changes in the hearth at all. Tonight the sun rises the way it rose 10,000 nights ago, and will rise the way it rises tonight for tens of thousands of nights still to come, changing so slowly that within any single lifetime, within any single century, it does not really change at all. The steadiness you feel is not an illusion borrowed for comfort. It is simply, plainly true. The fire tonight burns exactly as steadily as it burned last night, and it will burn that way tomorrow, and it does not ask you to keep watch over it while it does. Only far, far ahead, further ahead than the whole span from that first turning cloud until now, doubled and doubled again, does the story of the fire begin, very slowly, to change. In roughly 5 billion years, once the hydrogen at the very center has at last been spent, the hearth will begin to answer differently to gravity's old patient pull. The core will contract and warm further, and the outer layers, freed from their old balance, will begin to swell outward, not violently, not suddenly, but the way bread rises, the way a slow tide comes in over the course of an entire unhurried afternoon. Over what will still be an immense stretch of time, the sun will grow into what astronomers call a red giant. Its outer light reddening and spreading wide enough, eventually, to reach past the orbits worlds now sit in, the whole hearth loosening into something larger and gentler and dimmer at its edges. Like embers spreading rather than a flame standing tall, the fire growing wide instead of bright, filling more of the room even as it grows less fierce. And even that is not an ending so much as a long, unhurried settling. In time, the outer layers will drift free entirely, breathing outward into space as a soft, glowing shell that will, for a while, be more beautiful than anything the house has held before. a wide ring of colored light around the small, dense core it once surrounded. The last exhalation of a very long life. What remains at the center, dense, quiet, no longer burning by fusion at all, will become what is called a white dwarf, an ember, essentially, small and faint and extraordinarily patient, radiating away its last warmth not over years or centuries, but over trillions of them. It will not so much go out as simply, unhurriedly, dim. The way a coal at the very back of a fireplace keeps a low heat in it long after the rest of the room has gone dark, asking nothing of anyone, needing no one to add another log. Trillions is a number so far past the edge of any calendar that it stops being a countdown and becomes, instead, a kind of reassurance. A fire that takes trillions of years to finally go fully dark is not a fire anyone alive tonight needs to worry about tending. It is closer to knowing that the house you were born in will still, in some form, be standing long after every name that was ever spoken in it has been forgotten and remembered and forgotten again. That is not a sad thought out here, floating. It is closer to relief. Nothing here is asking anything of you. The fire's whole vast biography, from turning cloud to ember, unfolds on a scale built to hold you gently rather than to press on you at all, and you are welcome, for as long as you like, to simply let it. So let both ends of that story rest together for a moment. The cloud that turned and lit itself 4.5 billion years ago, and the ember it will become trillions of years from now, with tonight sitting somewhere comfortably early along that impossibly long middle stretch. The hearth is young enough to still be finding its rhythm, and old enough to have already found it. You were never going to catch it changing. You were only ever going to be warmed by it, for as long as your own, much smaller, much quicker story unfolds beside its much slower one. And it is worth noticing, before the story turns elsewhere, that this fire has never burned in an empty room. From nearly the moment there were eyes capable of looking upward, there were eyes doing exactly that, turning toward the hearth, watching the way its light moved across a day, across a season, across a lifetime, and the way you might wonder now what exactly it was and where, precisely, it sat in relation to everything else. Long before anyone could explain fusion or measure a light year, people were already sitting with this same fire, in the dark, taking notes by its glow, passing what they noticed to whoever came next. That is its own kind of continuity, not the fire's stillness this time, but the stillness of all those patient watchers, generation folding into generation, each one handing the next a slightly steadier answer to the very question that first drew you down toward this hearth tonight. And because nothing about this fire has ever needed rushing, it seems fitting that the people who first sat with it, watching, took their time too. Long before anyone could weigh the sun or count its hydrogen, there were simply figures on a hillside or a rooftop or the deck of a boat, tilting their heads back and trying to make sense of a light that moved across the sky every day and never once asked to be understood. They had no instruments to speak of, only eyes, memory, and the willingness to keep looking up on the next clear night, and the next, letting the pattern reveal itself over years rather than demanding it all at once. You can picture them there now, small and patient in the dark, part of the same long line that eventually leads to you, lying still, listening to their story the way they once looked up and listened to the sky. The first to say it plainly was a man named Aristarchus on an island in the Aegean more than 2,000 years ago. He watched the shadow of the earth cross the moon during an eclipse. measured the small, careful angles between sun and moon and horizon, and arrived, with nothing but geometry and unhurried attention, at an idea that would not be believed again for 18 centuries, that the fire does not circle the house, but the house circles the fire. Nobody listened. Not really. The world kept its old arrangement, its earth-centered comfort, for a very long time, comfortable in the old belief that everything, even the hearth, must surely turn around the one who is watching it. But the thought had been placed into the record, waiting the way a seed waits underground through a long winter, in no hurry to be proven right, content simply to be there for whoever might dig it up again. It took until Copernicus, working alone with his charts in a cold study centuries later, for the idea to be picked back up and carried further, the planets sliding into their proper order around the sun. The numbers finally settling into place the way a key settles into a lock it was always shaped for. He kept the manuscript close for years before letting it go out into the world, as if even he needed time to trust what the arithmetic was telling him. Then, Kepler took those same planets and found that their paths were not perfect circles but graceful ellipses, the sun sitting not quite at the center of each loop, but slightly to one side. And in that small asymmetry, he heard something like music. Laws of motion so elegant they still hold today, unchanged, tested against instruments Kepler never could have dreamed of. He spent years bent over the careful sky records of another astronomer before him, sifting through decades of numbers by candlelight until the pattern finally gave itself up. And then Galileo turned one of the earliest telescopes toward the hearth itself and found it was not the flawless, changeless thing it was assumed to be. Dark spots moved across its face, appearing, drifting, fading. Proof that the fire itself breathed, shifted, had a weather of its own, and that watching closely enough would always reveal more than expected. It must have felt, for him, like leaning in close to something you thought you already knew, and noticing for the first time that it was alive, that even a hearth this old and steady still has its small, private flickers. Newton came after, and where the others had described the motions, he explained the reason for them, showing that gravity pulls both ways, that the sun holds the planets. Yes, but the planets, in their own small way, hold the sun as well. Both turning around a shared point of balance, neither one occupies alone. It is the same wobble you have already been carried through tonight, the barycenter drifting in and out of the fire's own body, and Newton was the first to write down, in the plain language of mathematics, why a hearth and a house must always move together, rather than one commanding and the other obeying. He worked it out during a stretch of quiet years away from the city, when a sickness had closed the university and left him with nothing but time, a garden, and a mind that would not stop turning the problem over. After him, watching the sky eased into something even more patient. Not just eyes and telescopes now, but instruments built to take the light apart at its seams and read what it was carrying. In 1868, an astronomer studying the sun's spectrum during an eclipse found a line of light that matched nothing known on Earth. Not iron, not hydrogen, not any element yet named in any laboratory. They called it helium, after the Greek word for the sun, because for a while it existed only there, a substance discovered in the fire itself, decades before anyone found it in the ground beneath their own feet. It sat as a kind of open question for years, a color in the spectrum with no earthly match, until it was finally traced into a mineral pulled from underground and recognized for what it had been all along. Think of that for a moment, how strange and tender it is, that something now folding gently through your own lungs with every breath, present in this very room, was first known to us only as a whisper in starlight, a fingerprint left by the hearth 8 minutes across the dark, read correctly long before anyone thought to look for it closer to home. The watching kept getting more hushed and stranger and closer to the fire's true heart. Deep underground, in old mines and hollowed mountains shielded from every other kind of noise, physicists built vast tanks of water and other fluids, waiting for the rarest of visitors, neutrinos, born in the very same fusion at the sun's core, passing through the earth, through walls, through you, almost without ever touching anything at all. For years the count of them kept coming up short, fewer arriving than the fire's own arithmetic said should be sent, and it took decades more of patient checking to learn that the missing ones had simply changed their nature along the way, disguised rather than gone. A handful of those ghostly particles, caught after a long vigil, are messages sent directly from the fire's deepest room, arriving here only about 8 minutes after they were made, untouched by their journey. Honest in a way that light itself is not, because sunlight takes that long, hidden walk of tens of thousands of years through the body of the sun before it ever reaches the surface, while a neutrino simply walks straight out, unbothered, and is home in minutes. Two different kinds of messengers, one taking its time and one in no hurry to be noticed at all, both telling the truth about the same fire. Then came the watchers who never slept at all. A spacecraft named Soho took up a steady post between Earth and Sun, in a spot where gravity balances just so, and it has sat there for decades now, one long, unbroken gaze, recording the sun's face day after day after day, cataloging its flares and spots and outbursts the way someone might keep a journal by the fire, night after night, simply because it is worth remembering. It has outlasted the mission planners who expected it to fail after a handful of years, faithful long past what anyone asked of it, still watching tonight while you rest. And in 2021, after all those centuries of standing back and admiring from a careful distance, a spacecraft finally did what no one before it had dared. The Parker Solar Probe flew directly into the corona itself, through that ghostly outer breath of the sun that burns hotter than the surface below it, shielded behind a single carbon composite face turned toward the flames, and came back out the other side with its instruments intact, having touched, for the first time, the very edges of the fire our whole house was built around. It carries, tucked inside it, a small memory card etched with the names of everyday people who asked to be sent along, a quiet passenger list riding into the hearth's own breath. Each of these people, the geometer on his island, the man with his charts, the ellipses, the sunspots, the shared point of balance, the line of light with no name, the ghost particles counted one by one in the dark, the patient eye of a spacecraft that never blinked, and finally the probe that reached in and touched what it was watching. Each one simply picked up where the last had left off, adding one small, careful note to a story none of them would finish alone. That is really all discovery has ever been. Someone noticing something true, writing it down, and handing it, unhurried, to whoever came next. The fire never needed any of them to burn. It was steady before the first eye ever looked up, and it will be steady after the last note is written. But it is a quiet kind of grace, isn't it, that so many patient people spent their lives simply keeping watch beside the same hearth that is warming you now, adding their small observations one on top of another until the shape of the whole house and the fire at the center of it came slowly into view. And so the house stands, known now in ways Aristarchus could only guess at, the hearth burning exactly as steadily as it did on the night he first looked up, the long line of watchers finally at rest, their notes gathered, their instruments resting, the sky outside settling into that particular hush that comes after a long story has been told all the way through, and you, here at the very end of the telling, held, warm, drifting. The fire tended by no one in particular, and everyone at once, low now and unhurried, and entirely enough. Tonight has been about a hearth, the one at the center of everything, the fire the whole house of our solar system was built around, and the way its light has been reaching you, patiently, for your entire life, without you ever having to ask for it. Tonight has been about the fire inside the fire, the core where hydrogen becomes helium in a warmth too vast for arithmetic, and the long, patient journey a single ray of light takes from that furnace out to the surface, and further still, across the empty dark, until it lands, at last, as nothing more than a little warmth on your skin, or a little light behind your closed eyes. Tonight has been about the rooms around the hearth, the family of worlds turning in their long, slow circles, and the tender, almost domestic truth that even the center of a solar system is not a fixed point, but something that sways, faintly, drawn this way and that, by the very children gathered around it, the way any home shifts its weight toward whoever fills it. Tonight has been about the long story of the fire, the billions of years it has already kept burning, the billions more it has left, and the long centuries of patient human looking that it took for us to finally understand what we were looking at, without ever once needing to leave our own doorstep to learn it. None of this needs anything from you tonight. Not your attention, not your understanding, not even your wakefulness. The sun will keep doing exactly what it has always done, hour after hour, whether you are watching or not, whether you are awake or already asleep in the next room of your own small house. You do not have to remember the core, or the orbits, or the sway, or the light's long journey. You are allowed to let every one of those images blur at the edges and slip away, the way a fire blurs and softens when your eyes start to close in front of it. Another quiet exploration is already waiting just behind this one, ready on the screen, and you do not have to do anything at all. You can simply let it begin on its own. Let it carry you further, while you drift off exactly where you are. And if you want something small to loosen into rather than answer, here it is, with nothing expected of you. Which room of the house do you imagine yourself in tonight? Near the hearth, or further out, in one of the far rooms, wrapped in whatever light has traveled all this way just to reach you? There is nothing left to hold. Let your hands go heavy. Let your breathing settle into whatever pace it wants, low and easy, unhurried, unwatched. Let the fire at the center of everything keep its own patient watch tonight, so that you don't have to keep any watch at all. Let your eyes rest. Let your whole body sink a little further into the dark, the way a house settles at night, board by board, into silence. Sleep well.